November 12, 1944, James Whitaker sat at a desk in a farmhouse outside Nancy, France, with a dead priest's writing supplies, hoping to capture the essence of a letter. Beside him were the dead priest's writing materials, a boring wooden table, a cheap cloth to erase his pen, and an old pen. Before writing the first 3 words, he had already sacrificed dwelling too much on the expression. He had written, "My dearest Catherine." After that, he couldn't write anything. He was writing this letter to a woman 400 miles away, with no idea what she was going through. She had been waiting for this letter since June 1942. In about 6 weeks, this letter was hoped to reach her, provided the postal system worked properly. Whitaker would never know, or wouldn't know, that as he struggled with 3 words, Catherine Hayes was in a church in Columbus, Ohio, wearing her mother's wedding dress and about to marry someone else, which was very painful. James Whitaker was 26 years old when he met Catherine Hayes in March 1942. They met at a USO dance in Columbus. He wasn't supposed to be there. His unit, Company B of the 28th Infantry Division, was leaving the next morning. His friend, Frank, had dragged him there with the logic of desperate men facing an ocean crossing. One last dance before we go kill Nazis. What's the harm? The harm was falling completely, irreversibly in love in about 4 hours. Catherine was 23. Her older brother was already overseas, and she was a teacher who volunteered at the USO on weekends because sitting at home doing nothing seemed pointless. She wore a blue dress. He would remember this detail for the rest of his life. Exactly that shade of blue, like forget-me-nots. And when she smiled at him from across the dance floor, something in his chest stopped working properly. They danced to Glenn Miller. They talked during the slow songs. Her voice had a slight rasp, like a noisy child who had worn out her vocal cords from shouting. She told him about teaching 3rd grade, about a student named Tommy who couldn't read but drew birds that seemed to fly off the paper. He told her about growing up on a wheat farm in Kansas, about his father who died when James was 16, about joining the army because farming alone felt like slowly disappearing. At 11:30 p.m., they went outside. Ohio was still cold in March, the air so sharp that breathing felt like swallowing knives. Catherine shivered. James gave her his jacket. The jacket swallowed her completely. "You're leaving tomorrow," she said. It wasn't a question. "Tomorrow," he confirmed. "Where?" "I can't say. They don't tell us much. Somewhere in Europe." Catherine was silent. The music from inside was now muffled, distant. Someone laughed, a bright, carefree sound that felt like it belonged to a different world. "I'll write to you," he said. The words came out before he decided to say them. "If you want, I mean, if you want letters from a farm boy who can't dance very well. You dance well. I stepped on your foot twice." "3 times, she corrected. But she was smiling. "And yes, I'd like to receive letters. I'll write too." They exchanged addresses in the cold. Catherine's handwriting was neat and delicate, a teacher's handwriting. James's was terrible, slanted and cramped. Catherine studied his address, Company B, 28th Infantry Division, and something changed in her face. Not quite fear, maybe recognition, understanding that such addresses promised nothing. At 11:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the dance ended, he kissed her. Short, pure, the kind of kiss that could keep a man standing through months of uncertainty. She tasted like the cocktail they served inside. Too sweet, artificial cherry flavor, and she tasted like hope. "Come back," she whispered against his lips. "I will. Promise? I promise." 12 hours later, he left. The troop transport ship departed from New York Harbor on a gray morning that felt like the sky was mourning something not yet lost. As America disappeared, he stood at the railing, thinking about a blue dress, a raspy voice, and a promise he shouldn't have made. The letters began in April 1942. He wrote the first letter on the transport ship. 3 pages of terrible handwriting describing the ocean and the smell of too many men in close quarters and how he couldn't stop thinking about forget-me-nots. He mailed it when they docked in England, not knowing if it would reach her. Catherine's reply came 6 weeks later, delivered through military postal channels that moved at continental drift speed. She wrote about spring in Ohio, about Tommy, who was finally starting to read, about her mother, who wondered if this soldier boy was serious. The paper smelled faintly of lavender. He held the paper to his face and breathed, and felt less alone. They wrote constantly. He wrote from England during training exercises, from troop transports crossing to North Africa, from a field hospital after taking shrapnel to his shoulder at Kasserine Pass. Catherine replied, writing about her students, report cards and victory gardens, about how the world felt like it was holding its breath. In 2 years, they exchanged 173 letters. None contained a face-to-face conversation. They built their entire relationship from ink, paper, and imagination. He learned that Catherine was afraid of thunder, but loved rain, that she wanted to be a dancer before her father died and money got tight, that she wrote poems she showed no one, terrible poems full of forced rhymes and exaggerated metaphors, she said. He loved that she confessed this. Catherine learned that James was quiet in groups but wouldn't stop talking one-on-one, that he read all of Steinbeck and most of Hemingway, that after the war he wanted to return to Kansas and grow wheat and maybe teach high school English, combining the two things he understood. In May 1943, he proposed marriage. The letter was 4 pages long, written in a barn outside Palermo, while mortar fire shook dust from the rafters. He tried to be eloquent. He failed. The proposal came down to 3 sentences. I love you. I've loved you since that March night. When I get home, will you marry me? It took 2 months for Catherine's reply to reach him. When it arrived, forwarded to a field hospital in Sicily where he was recovering with a broken leg, he opened the envelope with hands trembling so badly he nearly tore it. A single word on the first line, yes. Then 2 pages explaining yes, turning yes into paragraphs about future plans, small houses and children they would have. She wrote that she had already told her mother had cried, and told her father had grumbled but smiled. She signed, Your future wife, Catherine. He carried this letter in his chest pocket throughout the Italian campaign, throughout the liberation of Rome, throughout the landing in southern France. It got dirty, sweat-stained. The ink ran in some places. He didn't care. It was proof that somewhere in the world, someone was waiting for him. By November 1944, Whitaker's unit was dug in outside Nancy, France. The German army was retreating, but fighting savagely for every mile. His company had lost 32 men since June. The replacements were children, 18-year-olds who looked at war veterans like Whitaker with a mixture of admiration and fear. He was writing regularly to Catherine, but the letters had become harder to write. Not because he loved her less, he loved her more, with an intensity that sometimes frightened him, but because it felt impossible to describe what he was seeing, doing, what he was becoming. How do you write to someone teaching 3rd grade in Ohio about watching your friends die? How do you explain to someone who has never seen death how artillery fire changes the shape of human bodies? So his letters got shorter, more about missing her than where he was. He talked more about the future than the present. Catherine's letters continued to arrive as regularly as a heartbeat. She wrote about rationing getting worse, teaching getting harder because more fathers weren't coming home, about wedding plans. She said she wanted something small, just family. Maybe at the church on Oak Street where her parents got married. Spring would be nice, April or May, when the weather warmed up. In October 1944, she wrote that she was looking at houses. There was one on Maple Street, small, 2 bedrooms, nothing fancy, but with a porch and a yard big enough for a garden. She could see them there, she wrote. She could see him reading on that porch, their children playing in that yard. She had walked past it 3 times, trying to imagine their lives. Whitaker read this letter in a trench, while rain turned the earth into soup. He could see it too. Catherine on that porch, himself alive, whole, and home. The image felt like a betrayal somehow, as if wanting it too much would guarantee he could never have it. But he wrote back anyway. He told her yes. That house sounded perfect. April would be perfect. Everything would be perfect if he could get through this. What he didn't know was that Catherine's last 3 letters hadn't reached him. They were lost somewhere in the chaos of shifting front lines, the confusion of postal units trying to keep up with advancing armies, the simple mathematics of war, where letters were lower priority than ammunition and medical supplies. Those 3 letters contained information that could have changed everything. Thomas Morrison was 31 years old, a defense plant manager in Columbus classified 4F due to chronic asthma. He had known Catherine Hayes since childhood. Their families went to the same church and had been quietly, hopelessly in love with her for about 15 years. When Whitaker left in 1942, Morrison saw an opportunity. Not immediately. He wasn't cruel. But as months became years, as Catherine remained overseas without a military return date, Morrison positioned himself as a friend, a shoulder, someone reliable and available, while Whitaker became a collection of letters from an increasingly distant war, an abstraction. He would visit Catherine at school, bringing coffee and pastries he claimed were left over from management meetings. He would help her mother with home repairs. He would listen when Catherine wanted to talk about Whitaker, about her fears, about the gnawing uncertainty of loving someone who might already be dead. Morrison was patient. He didn't push. He waited. In June 1944, right after D-Day, letters from Whitaker stopped. Not completely, but the frequency dropped. 1 letter in June, 1 in July, none in August. Catherine tried not to panic. She knew the invasion meant chaos. She knew postal service would be disrupted. She knew soldiers didn't always have time to write while fighting. But the silence ate at her. Morrison was there. He listened to her fears. He reassured her. He also quietly, methodically suggested that Whitaker might not be coming back. Not necessarily dead. Morrison wasn't that cruel. But maybe captured or injured and unable to write, or turned by the war into someone who had forgotten the girl he once danced with in Ohio. By September, Catherine was unraveling. Her letters to Whitaker became desperate, pleading, "Are you alive? Please write. Please say you're okay. I need to know you're still there." None of these letters reached him. On September 28, 1944, Catherine received a letter from the War Department. Standard form, impersonal. Second Lieutenant James Whitaker is officially listed as missing as of August 15th, following an engagement near the French-German border. Further information will be provided as it becomes available. Missing, not dead, but not alive either. Suspended in terrible uncertainty. She collapsed. Literally, her mother found her on the kitchen floor, the letter still clutched in her hand, making sounds that were neither quite crying nor screaming. Morrison was there within an hour. He had heard from church gossip. He held her while she fell apart, whispered comforts that meant nothing, and felt something dark and triumphant coil in his chest. The problem with grief is that it doesn't kill you cleanly. It lingers, transforms, becomes something else. For Catherine, missing meant living in permanent suspension. Not a widow, not a girlfriend, just someone waiting for information that might never come. October was grim. November was worse. Morrison visited every day. He brought food Catherine couldn't eat, told stories she didn't hear, existed as a warm body in the cold voids that grief created. On November 8th, 1944, he proposed to her. The proposal was gentle, almost apologetic. He knew the timing was terrible. He knew she was still waiting for news about Whitaker. But life didn't stop, he said. The world kept turning. She deserved someone who was there, instead of someone who might be dead in a ditch in France. Catherine said no. He nodded, said he understood, said the offer remained open. On November 10th, the War Department sent another letter. Whitaker's status unchanged. Missing. No additional information. On November 15th, Catherine's mother sat her down for a conversation that tasted like ash. "You can't wait forever," her mother said. "Tom Morrison is a good man. Here, he loves you. James, Catherine, you have to consider that he might not be coming back." He promised. Men promise many things in war. That night, Catherine sat alone in her room, surrounded by 173 letters, the entire history of a relationship built on paper. She read them all, starting from April 1942, following James Whitaker's evolution from tense soldier to war veteran, to the man who proposed to her from a barn in Sicily. The last letter she received from him was dated July 30th, 1944, 4 months ago. He wrote about missing her, coming home, about that house on Maple Street. Nothing about dying, nothing about not coming back. But silence was also a kind of answer. On November 20th, 1944, Catherine Hayes said yes to Thomas Morrison. Not because she loved him, not because she stopped loving Whitaker, but because grief, uncertainty, and endless waiting had eroded her to nothing. And Morrison was offering something concrete. A future, stability, an end to terrible suspension. They set the wedding for December 23rd. Fast, simple, no fuss. Morrison's mother offered her own wedding dress. Catherine numbly accepted. She wrote one last letter to Whitaker. She wrote to his unit, knowing it probably wouldn't reach him, knowing if he was dead, it would come back, but feeling she had to say it anyway. "Dear James, I don't know if you'll read this. The War Department says you're missing. I hope that means you're alive somewhere, maybe captured, maybe wounded, but recovering. I hope this with my entire being. But I can't wait anymore. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm betraying you, but I can't live in this uncertainty. Tom Morrison asked me to marry him, and I said yes. We're getting married on December 23rd. I loved you. I still love you. I probably always will. But I have to move forward. I have to live. Please forgive me. Please understand. Yours always, Catherine." She mailed the letter on November 24th. It would take 6 weeks to reach France. The letter Catherine sent on November 24th, 1944, moved through the postal system at continental drift speed. Columbus to New York, New York to a supply ship that spent 8 days crossing the ocean dodging U-boats, England to a distribution center in Paris, Paris to the front lines, where postal clerks sorted through thousands of correspondence, trying to match names with units that moved daily. By the time it reached the correct postal station, James Whitaker was no longer missing. He had never been missing. The August 15th incident that listed him as missing involved a communication breakdown during a German counterattack near the Moselle River. His squad was cut off for 72 hours. When they fought their way back to American lines, the paperwork got lost in the chaos. A clerk marked him as missing instead of present. The correction took 11 weeks to process through military bureaucracy. By then, Catherine had already said yes to another man. Whitaker knew none of this. He was alive, unhurt, writing letters that continued to get lost in the routing system. Between August and November, he had written to Catherine 6 times. None reached her. Catherine's letters to him, the desperate ones, asking if he was alive, the final letter explaining she was marrying Morrison, sat waiting for someone at a postal sorting facility, trying to figure out where Company B was now. On December 18th, 1944, 5 days before Catherine's wedding, Whitaker's unit was pulled back for rest and resupply. They were housed in a requisitioned school building in Nancy. He had a cot, hot food for the first time in weeks, and access to a working shower. The postal clerk found him during breakfast. "Whitaker, there's a pile here. Looks like they found your address." 17 letters. Catherine's handwriting on every envelope. Whitaker's hands trembled as he sorted them by date. The first few were normal, updates about her students, about rationing, plans about their future, dated June, July, early August. Then the tone changed. August 20th, James, I haven't heard from you in weeks. Are you okay? Please write. September 5th, James, I'm so worried. Please, just a few words. Let me know you're alive. September 15th, the War Department says you're missing. Missing? I don't know what that means. I don't know how to live with this word. October 3rd, it's been 2 months. Please be alive. Please come back. Whitaker felt something cold spread through his chest. He grabbed the last letter, postmarked November 24th. He read it standing in the middle of the mess hall while soldiers ate eggs and complained about coffee. He read it 3 times. Then he walked outside into December cold that felt like it was coming from inside his body. Tom Morrison asked me to marry him, and I said yes. We're getting married on December 23rd. December 23rd. He looked at his watch. December 18. 5 days. His mind went blank for about 30 seconds. Then he started calculating with the desperate speed of a man watching everything he planned fall apart. 5 days. She was getting married in 5 days. He could write to her. A letter would take 6 weeks to arrive. 6 weeks was far too late. He could call. International military calls required authorization that took days. Days he didn't have. He needed to go home. He needed to get to Columbus, Ohio, before December 23rd. The thought should have been ridiculous. He was in France. The girl was 4,000 miles away. He was an active-duty soldier in the middle of a war. He couldn't just leave, but he couldn't think of anything else. What happened next would be called either desperate romanticism or criminal stupidity, depending on who was telling it. Whitaker went to Company Commander Captain Robert Chen. A practical man from Oregon, Chen had kept Company B alive for 2 years through a combination of tactical skill and disregard for illogical regulations. Sir, I need emergency leave. Chen looked up from his paperwork. Whitaker, you just got here. What's the emergency? Ooh, family emergency. Sir, I need to go home immediately. Someone die? Not yet, but someone's about to marry the wrong person. Chen stared at him. Say that again, Whitaker explained. The letters. The missing status. Catherine thinking he was dead or missing. The wedding in 5 days. Chen listened to the whole story. Then he leaned back in his chair and laughed. Not mockingly, really. The kind of laughter that comes from recognizing something absurd and true. Son, you understand, it's logistically impossible to get you from France to Ohio in 5 days. Yes, sir. You understand unauthorized absence is a court-martial offense. Yes, sir. Even if I approved emergency leave, which I don't have the authority to do, military transport doesn't work that fast. Yes, sir. I understand all of that. Chen studied him. Whitaker had been in Company B since North Africa. 3 war campaigns, 2 wounds. He had never asked for anything. How much money do you have? $140. Sir, saved pay. Chen opened his desk drawer, pulled out a metal box, counted out bills. Here's 200 more. That's a loan. Whitaker, you pay it back when you get home from the war. If you get home. Sir, I can't. Shut up and take it. Chen wrote something on a paper, signed it, stamped it with the company's seal. This is a 72-hour pass. Technically forged, but I'd bet nobody at transport points will look closely. You have until December 21 before you're officially AWOL. Sir, get out of my office before I remember regulations exist. Whitaker left before Chen could change his mind. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of movement and desperation. He hitchhiked to Paris on a supply truck, 12 hours in the back of a deuce and a half, freezing. Watching France pass by through top layers, in Paris, he went straight to a military airfield. A transport plane was loading, carrying wounded and priority cargo to England. Whitaker walked up to the cargo chief, a tired-looking sergeant named Williams. I need to get on this plane. Williams barely looked at him. Manifests full. Whitaker pulled out Chen's pass and $60. I have emergency transfer authorization. This is for your trouble. Williams looked at the pass, looked at the money, looked at Whitaker's face. What he saw there made him sigh. You didn't bribe me. I saw your emergency authorization and felt compassion. You didn't get on without me noticing. The England flight took 3 hours. They landed at a base in Suffolk at 11 p.m. Whitaker had less than 4 days. In Suffolk, he learned there were no transport flights to America before December 27th. Too late. Far too late. But there were supply convoys, Liberty ships carrying equipment to America for refit and repair. One was leaving Southampton the next morning. He hitchhiked again, this time in a jeep driven by a British corporal who found the situation amusing. Chasing a girl across an ocean during a war? Bloody hell, mate. That's either the most romantic thing I've heard or the stupidest. Probably both, Whitaker admitted. Good luck then. You'll need it. Southampton dock at dawn. December 20th. The Liberty ship Samuel Chase was loading, scheduled to depart at 10. Whitaker found Captain Kowalski, a weathered man who had been running Atlantic convoys since 1942. Need passage to New York. We don't run passenger service. Whitaker showed him the pass and explained the situation. Kowalski listened expressionlessly. The Atlantic in December is a nightmare. We'll hit storms. Passage takes 8 to 10 days. You won't make your deadline. Maybe you'll have good weather. There's no good weather in the Atlantic in December. I have to try. Kowalski studied him, then he nodded once. We have crew bunks. You'll work for passage. We need men in the engine room. Can you shovel coal? Yes, sir. Get on board. The Atlantic in December was as terrible as Kowalski promised. Storms hit on the second day, waves 3 stories high. The Samuel Chase pitched and rolled like a dying thing. Half the crew had seasickness. Whitaker, who had crossed the Atlantic twice before and had the resilience of a farm boy raised, eating his mother's questionable stews, got through it. 6 hours in the engine room, heat, noise, and coal dust. Then 6 hours off, trying to sleep while the ship tried to tear itself apart. He worked and calculated. They left Southampton on December 20th. Kowalski estimated arrival would be December the 28th. Too late. The wedding was December 23rd. But when Whitaker started, December 23rd was 5 days away. The ship was moving. Time was moving. Each hour brought him closer, even as the deadline approached. He couldn't think about what would happen if he arrived too late. Catherine married to Morrison, living in that house on Maple Street, building a life with the wrong person. Instead, he thought about the promise he made. March 1942, outside the USO dance. Come back. I will. He was coming back. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, the storms passed. The Atlantic became flat and gray, the sky low and heavy, but calm. The Samuel Chase made better time. Kowalski found Whitaker in the engine room during night shift. Radio just got weather reports. If this holds, we'll make New York on December 26. Maybe 27. Still too late. But closer. Thank you. Sir, don't thank me. Thank God or fate or whatever you believe in. And hope your girl hasn't married that other guy yet. She won't. Son, I've been married 30 years. I've learned that women do the sensible thing when men aren't there to complicate matters. You not being there, that complicated things for her. If she made a choice, don't blame her. Whitaker didn't respond. He couldn't. December 23rd, 1944, Columbus, Ohio. The church on Oak Street was small, wooden, the kind of structure that had housed generations of weddings, baptisms, and funerals. Catherine stood in the vestibule wearing her mother-in-law's wedding dress. It fit poorly, too long in the sleeves, too tight in the waist. But no one had time for alterations. Outside, snow was falling in thick, wet flakes. Inside, 50 people waited. Morrison's family, Catherine's family, neighbors, church friends. Everyone came to celebrate or witness. Sometimes They were the same thing. Catherine's mother adjusted her veil. "You look beautiful." Catherine looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, dressed in ghostly whites. "Mom, I can't do this." Cold feet. Every bride gets them. "No, I mean, I can't marry Tom while I still love James." Her mother's hands stilled. "Catherine, James is gone. Missing, that's not the same as dead." "Close enough. You can't spend your life waiting for a man who's probably never coming back." He promised. Men promise many things in war. Her mother's voice was sharp, almost cruel. "I'm sorry. I know that's harsh, but you need to hear it. James might have been a good man, but he's not here. Tom is here. He loves you. He'll give you a life. You can't marry a ghost." Catherine looked at her reflection again. Her mother was right. Logically, practically, undeniably right. But logic didn't change how empty her chest felt. The organ started playing. The signal. Time to walk down the aisle. Catherine picked up her bouquet, winter flowers, white and pale yellow, and stepped toward the church doors. December 26, 1944, New York Harbor. The Samuel Chase docked at 11 in freezing rain that turned the dock into an ice rink. Whitaker got off the ship before it was fully secured. He had no money left. He had paid Kowalski his debt for passage. He had $7 in his pocket and a desperate need to get from New York to Ohio immediately. A train would take 12 hours and cost more than he had. He went to the dockmaster's office and explained his situation. Again, the dockmaster, a man named Rousseau, who had seen every kind of desperate soldier, listened and shook his head. "Son, I can't help you, but there's a freight company going to Chicago. If you're willing to ride in back, they might take you." The freight company took him. The back of an unheated truck carrying machine parts. Whitaker climbed in, found a corner, and spent the next 14 hours freezing and trying not to think about what day it was. December 26, 3 days after the wedding. Too late. The thought sat in his chest like a stone. He had crossed an ocean, bribed his way onto ships and trucks, probably violated a dozen military regulations, and it was too late. But he kept going anyway. December 27, 1944, Columbus, Ohio. The house on Maple Street was exactly as Catherine had described. Small, white exterior, a porch that wrapped halfway around, a yard buried under December snow. Whitaker stood on the sidewalk at 4 p.m. as daylight was dying and looked at it. Lights were on inside. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was home. He had thought about this moment for days. What he would say, how he would explain. Now, standing here on this street where his future should have been, he had no words at all. He climbed the steps. His boots left muddy tracks on the white porch. His uniform was filthy. 3 weeks of travel worked into the fabric. He smelled of coal dust, salt water, and desperation. He knocked on the door, footsteps from inside. The door opened. Catherine stood there in a house dress and apron. Her hair was tied back. She had lost weight. Her face was thinner than he remembered. For about 5 seconds, neither of them moved. Then Catherine made a sound. Not quite a scream, not quite a sob, and collapsed. Whitaker caught her before she hit the floor. She didn't faint, just became unable to stand. Whitaker held her, half-carried her into the house. A living room, sparse furniture, a fire burning in the fireplace. He sat her on the couch. She stared at him like he was a ghost that might disappear if she blinked. "James?" "Yes. It's me. You died. They said you were missing. I thought I didn't die. I was never missing. Paperwork error. I tried to write you. The letters got lost. I married Tom." The words came out flat, mechanical. 3 days ago, I married him. The stone in Whitaker's chest became granite. "I know. I got your letter. I tried to get here in time. You're 4 days late." "I know." They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, someone drove past, tires squeaking in snow. Catherine's hands were shaking. "I waited for you. I waited 2 years. Then they said you were missing, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to keep waiting without knowing if you were alive. I understand. Do you? Do you understand what it's like to love someone who might be dead? What that uncertainty does to you? No, I don't. He looked at her, really looked. He saw the weight she'd lost, the darkness under her eyes, how her hands wouldn't stop shaking. But I understand I was too late, and I'm sorry for the letters that didn't arrive, for the paperwork error, for promising I'd come back and taking too long. I love you. She said it like a confession. I married Tom, but I love you. I'll always love you, but I can't. I made a promise. I stood in a church and made a promise. I know. So what do we do? Whitaker had no answer. Thomas Morrison came home at 5:30 p.m. He opened the front door and found his wife of 3 days sitting on the couch next to a soldier in a dirty army uniform. He understood immediately. No explanation needed. You're Whitaker. Yes. Morrison set down his briefcase carefully. They said you were missing. Paperwork error. You came back. Yes. Morrison looked at Catherine. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken since Morrison came in. Frozen between two men, two lives, two promises. Catherine, do you want him or me? The question was cruel in its simplicity. Catherine looked at Morrison, kind, steady Morrison who had been there through everything, who held her when she broke, who offered stability when everything was chaos. Then she looked at Whitaker, who had written her 173 letters, who crossed an ocean to keep a promise, who she had loved since March 1942. I don't know, she whispered. What happened next took 3 days to unravel. Whitaker got a room at a boarding house. Morrison stayed at the house on Maple Street. Catherine stayed with her mother. Space was needed. Distance. Time to think. On December 30th, Catherine met Whitaker at a diner on High Street. They sat in a corner booth and drank coffee that tasted like motor oil. I can't leave Tom, she said. I made a promise. In a church, before God and everyone. I can't break that. I know, but I love you. I know. So what do we do? Whitaker had been thinking about this for 3 days, thinking about promises, timing, and how much of life came down to being in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. You keep your promise, he said. You stay married to Morrison. You build the life you planned. And you? I go back to France. I finish the war. When it's over, I come home. Then what? Then I live knowing I was 4 days too late. Catherine's hands were shaking again. I'm so sorry. Don't be. You waited as long as you could. The rest is just bad timing. They sat in silence. Outside, Columbus moved through a cold December afternoon. People shopping, living, existing in a world that continued to turn independent of personal tragedy. I want you to know something, Catherine said. If you had come 4 days earlier, hell, 4 hours earlier, I would have called off the wedding. I would have said no to Tom. I would have chosen you without hesitation. I know, but you didn't. And now I'm married, and I have to honor that. I know. She reached across the table, held his hand. Her fingers were cold. I'll love you for the rest of my life, but I can't be with you. Whitaker held her hand, felt her pulse under his thumb, memorized exactly how this felt so he could still remember it 50 years later. I'll love you too. January 3rd, 1945. Whitaker returned to his unit. Captain Chen looked at him, looked at the travel orders showing 11 days AWOL, and said nothing. Did you make it? 4 days late. Chen nodded. Bad timing? Yes. You going to be okay? Eventually. Maybe. Get back to work. Whitaker, war's still on. He went back to war. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge, crossed the Rhine, advanced into Germany. He came out of the war physically at least intact. He returned to Kansas in July 1945. He bought a small farm outside Salina. He taught English at the local high school. He lived alone. Over the years, people tried to set him up. Nice women, suitable women. He was polite, but uninterested. His mother once asked why he never dated. "I'm already in love with someone," he said. "Where is she?" "In Ohio, married to someone else." He never saw Catherine again, never wrote to her, never tried to contact her, but he kept every letter she wrote him. 173 letters in a wooden box in his closet. Catherine stayed married to Thomas Morrison for 56 years. They had 3 children, 7 grandchildren. Morrison was a good husband. Kind, steady, present. She never regretted marrying him. But she never stopped thinking about James Whitaker either. She kept his letters too, hidden in a trunk in the attic. Sometimes, when Morrison was at work and the house was empty, she would climb up there and read them. She reminded herself that once, briefly, she was loved with the kind of desperate intensity that crossed oceans. Morrison died of a heart attack in 1987. Fast, painless. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. Catherine was 70 at the funeral. Her children wanted her to move in with them. She refused. She stayed in the house on Maple Street, the house she had chosen while imagining a different life. 6 months after Morrison's death, she received a letter, forwarded through church connections, through people who remembered. James Whitaker's handwriting, still terrible, still cramped. "Dear Catherine, I heard about Tom's passing. I'm sorry for your loss. From what I understand, he was a good man who loved you well. I'm writing because I'm 71 years old and I've loved you for 45 years. I was 4 days late in 1944. I don't want to be late again. Would you consider having coffee with me? I know it's been decades. I know we're different people now, but I'd like to see you, if you want. Yours always, James." Catherine read the letter 3 times. Then she picked up the phone. They met on a Saturday in March 1988 in Columbus, almost exactly 46 years after they first danced at the USO event. Catherine waited at the same diner on High Street where they had said goodbye in 1944. She was nervous, which felt ridiculous. She was 70 years old. Too old for first date nerves. Whitaker came in at 2 p.m. He was gray-haired, thinner than she remembered, walking with a slight limp from the leg broken in Sicily. They looked at each other across the diner. Then they both smiled. He sat across from her. "Hello. Hello. You look good." "You're a liar. I'm 70. You look good for 70. They ordered coffee. They talked for 4 hours. About their lives, their children, their losses, about the 46 years they spent apart, about the letters they both kept. When the diner closed at 6, they moved to her car and kept talking. At 9 p.m., Catherine looked at him. "I wasted 46 years with the wrong person." "You didn't waste anything. You built a good life." "But not with you." "No, but we were both honoring our promises." "That matters." "Does it?" "Yes, I think it does." Silence. Then, "Would you like to come in? See the house I chose while imagining you would live there?" "Yes, I would." They didn't waste any more time. Whitaker proposed 3 months later. Catherine said yes without hesitation. They married in June 1988 in a small church in Kansas. Both their children attended, bewildered but supportive. 2 71-year-olds marrying like young people. They had 12 years before Catherine died in 2000. Whitaker followed her 8 months later. When their children cleaned out the Kansas farm, they found the letters. 173 from Catherine, 168 from Whitaker. Every letter preserved, catalogued, cherished. The last letter in the collection was dated December 1999. Whitaker had written it to Catherine for their anniversary. "My dearest Catherine, we lost 46 years to bad timing and promises we had to keep. But we got 12 years in the end, 12 years with exactly the right person. I would cross that ocean again. I would be 4 days late again, because those 12 years were worth every moment of waiting. I love you. I've loved you since March 1942. I'll love you until I stop breathing. Always yours, James." My view isn't about perfect timing. You can't get that in life. The most important lesson to take away is respect for words, even if it costs you everything. And sometimes, if you're incredibly lucky, you get a second chance. Catherine and James were a little over 4 days too late in 1944. But they were never too late forever. Sometimes timing is wrong. Sometimes you have to wait 46 years. But if what you have is real, if what you feel is important enough to last decades, oceans are crossed, broken promises are crossed, then maybe the words, "not too late," should be said a little late. They proved love doesn't end. It just waits. And when the moment comes, it shines bright enough to make up for all the years lost.